Welcome back to Vetted VA Live. It is Tuesday, and we are here with another crew of experts. We have Gary Foote, a realtor, and I've got three loan officers, Brandy Brickler, Rylan Maddox, and Randy Teakle. So we're going to take a little different approach. A lot of times we're here and we're talking about a specific topic, an issue or problem, or how to do something. Tonight, we're taking the approach of you've decided that you're going to buy a home in 2024. What are the potential pain points, breakdowns, things that cause delays, and what can you do from your end to plan and prepare for a smooth, easy, on-time closing, working with both your realtor and your mortgage professional. So remember, every week we get together here and we have an idea of where we want the conversation to go, but most importantly, we want to get your questions answered. So if you're here, throw up a question in the comments. We'll work it into the conversation. Does not have to be related to a smooth and easy closing. Anything you have mortgage or real estate related, VA, not VA related, we are here to answer those questions. So a reminder for everyone, if you're watching in the Vetted VA Facebook group, we are also streaming on the Vetted VA YouTube page. A lot of people are unaware that we have a YouTube page. Lots of awesome content out there that isn't quite as easy to surface inside of the Facebook group. So go out there, like and subscribe. You'll get notified when new videos go up. You'll get notified every Tuesday when we do the live here, every Wednesday when Hammer does the market updates. So again, a lot of good content. Would love for you to be out there. If you stumbled across this on YouTube and you're a veteran, you want more information, you can go to vettedva.com or go to Facebook and go to the Vetted VA group and join, and you'll get all of your questions answered that you want. So with that, let's sort of jump into the process. And Brandy, I'm going to let you have first crack at this. So when we're starting at the very beginning of the process, generally when someone says, I'm going to buy a home, where do I start? They might start with the realtor, but the realtor is going to tell them, hey, we need to get you pre-approved. So someone wants to buy a home. They need to get pre-approved. They've called, text, emailed you, and you are now on the phone with them. What's the first thing you want them to know to get things started on the right foot?
Well, the first thing I think when we're starting at the beginning is a lot of people are hesitant to actually have their credit pulled. They're like, no, I don't really want to have my credit pulled, but it's such an important piece of the puzzle. Because maybe they have, this is something that I find that comes up quite often, is that maybe they've done some work before they ever get to me. And sometimes that work is wrong. And so they may have looked at their credit report, found out that there might be a collection on that account. And so they took their money and they went over and they paid that collection account. And that could actually be really bad because they could have brought something that was like 6.5 years old right back up to the front. And now it's reporting and it's made their credit score worse. So we really want to talk to them before they actually do anything with their credit, before they, we want to talk before they're actually at that point.
I really like that. And just that thought of don't do anything until you've talked to professionals. Gary, from your perspective on the real estate side, what would you say, or what advice do you have above and beyond, hey, let's get you pre-approved with someone coming straight to you to start the process?
Absolutely. So I would agree that that's definitely number one, is connect to get pre-approved. But also be cautious, because we all get excited, even professionals, about new homes, whether it's you're about ready to go to sleep and you hop on your phone and see what's the new listings in your area, or you drive by a new community. But if you make contact with a new community, with someone on Zillow, Redfin, etc., prior to connecting with your trusted real estate person, there's a chance that you might not be allowed to be represented by that person. So that's a common mistake, where someone might see a balloon or a flag and walk into a new build. And if you're not accompanied by your chosen real estate professional at the first entry onto that new community, you may not be able to be represented. So that's a real common one that I see.
And I think that's a super easy mistake for people to make, because most businesses, if you go to their website and there's a shiny, happy face on there saying they will help you, they're with that business. You would talk to them and ask questions about the product, right? Yeah. Well, they don't consumers don't often realize that that is an independent realtor who is paid to be on there, and they have an expectation that they want to close a transaction with you. So it definitely, that whole idea of agency law is a little bit foreign for most people, and it's something important to take into account.
Not even realtor, by the way, if you don't mind me saying, not even realtor, by the way, who's sitting in that spot. It's a salesperson, and they have like given up their realtor designation and any like ethics guidelines that follow with that.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely some important stuff to remember there. Randy, when you have, let's say you've now got into that conversation with the borrower, they want to get pre-approved, you kind of went through what Brandy said, the do's and don'ts. Where do they go from there, and what can and should they be doing to optimize and streamline that pre-approval process, both to make it easier and to make sure it's dead solid accurate?
Well, for starters, for me, the biggest thing that you need to remember is that and it's a saying that we put on our page on a pretty regular basis, who you work with matters. And I would say that's the biggest thing, the biggest piece to avoid unnecessary stress, etc., is to choose the right team to begin with. So I get a lot of people that maybe their cousin just got their real estate license, and they're going to say, well, I always ask, who do you have for an agent? And they say, well, my cousin just got his real estate license, I'm going to use him. And, he could be the best agent ever. But what I'm always looking for, especially with veterans, active duty folks, is folks that are literally knowledgeable and passionate about what we do. And I think that piece right there just goes so much farther. And I would tell you back to, like 2020, when things were crazy busy, I would have agents that were representing my people that were passionate about the VA loan, et cetera. And they were getting offers accepted on a regular basis. And then I would have people that were having their cousin who just got their license represent them. And it was a painful process. So I would tell you that's the biggest thing. And then the same on the loan side is, you want to make sure somebody's knowledgeable. I read in one of the things that I read about, I think the average loan officer does 1.2 VA loans a year. Obviously, that's not the guy that you want representing you, the guy or girl. You want somebody that really knows the product, that's really got the ability to show you that, and make that same thing where that you don't want to get to closing and find out that your COE is not right. Things like that can happen and do happen all the time. There's ways around stuff that I had a deal the other day, and it got turned down at the very last minute because it was a 5-year guard and didn't have the points, etc. But they had 90 days of service, active service, and so they met that, but they had been turned down at the very last minute by somebody that should have known that right up front. So I would say my biggest thing with this whole process is to deal with somebody that you trust, that you're comfortable with, that you communicate well with, and make sure that they know what they're doing and that they regularly work with the VA loan on a daily basis, not 1.2 times a year.
Perfect. So, Rylan, assuming someone has got to you and you are the right person with the VA experience, what advice do you have for them in terms of what they should prepare, what they should expect, and how they can work with you as efficiently as possible in getting that pre-approval done?
Yeah. So one of the most important things I like to tell all of my borrowers right up front is I say, pretend I'm your defense attorney. I'm not going to break any laws for you, but I need to know everything as much as possible to help best guide you and advise you. And I actually just saw this example this morning, and it wasn't a VA loan, but the principle stands. This borrower was trying to apply for a loan. In underwriting, the pay stubs ran up a bunch of red flags. Numbers weren't quite matching up. Reference numbers were the same on different stubs. And long story short, the underwriter did their due diligence, and it come to find out this job was a past job from family. This was family employment. And the family was just trying to help their family member. And so they made up pay stubs. The really sad part of it was that the borrower had a job and they would have qualified with their normal pay stubs, but they were afraid they weren't going to. They didn't discuss with their loan officer. And so they made up and committed fraud, and everything blew up, and the bank denied them, obviously. And it was a really sad story that didn't need to happen in the first place. They were qualified. So be upfront with your loan officer. There is so much data out there nowadays. Either us or the bank or someone is going to find out. If you tell us, we can at least guide you and advise you on the best way to do it if there is a legal and honest path forward. It's going to come out, though. There's just too much data in today's world. Just be upfront. And then the other thing I like to tell people is fall in love with Adobe. Like, get everything in PDF as much as possible. Some banks do take JPEGs or screenshots or this, and that. But as much as possible, save your documents as PDF. And if you don't have PDF, there's something called Document Writer or XPS Document Writer on your PC. Print it out like you're going to print on a traditional printer piece of paper. And you can just print to Document Writer, and it's like a PDF. Your loan officer can work with that and save it as a PDF for you. So have your documents kind of ready and organized, and avoid those iPhone screenshots at weird angles with dark corners and stuff like that.
It's funny from our end. We know the importance of the documentation, that it's going to go into our system. It's going to go and get uploaded into a lender's system. Oftentimes those imaging systems will degrade from there. So if we start with a bad image, we're not trying to be a pain in the butt. I mean, I would love it if you could snap a screenshot of last month's pay stub from your phone, but it does not work that way. There's detail and information that the lender is going to require. So it's very important that what Ryland said is that if you can go to the source, if your HR department will allow you to download PDFs of pay stubs and W-2s, awesome. If you did your taxes in TurboTax or H&R Block, or your tax preparer can send them to you in a PDF of the entire thing. I get all the time, well, which pages do you need? Say, well, kill them all, let God sort them out. And I'm God, so you kill and send them over, and we'll go through and figure out what it is. But you really can't overstate that. And the thing that I also do like to point out, there are certain items that you're going to have an original hard copy. People say, well, I don't have a scanner. Good news, you have a cell phone. Everyone has a scanner. So if you have an Apple phone, the Apple Notes program will use the camera and make a scan into a PDF. It'll de-skew it. It'll take the shadows off. It'll do all the weird stuff. You can't do this from a crazy weird angle and 7 feet away, but if you stand over it, you're going to get a good result. If you're on an Android phone, it's built into the Google Drive app. It's in the Google Drive app on your iPhone also. And if you hate all of those options, you can get third-party options like Cam Scanner or Adobe Scan that don't cost anything that will do the same thing. So everyone has an awesome scanner in their pocket. So I always tell people, if you think you're going to be buying, some folks just hate documentation and they think that is tremendously difficult to track it all down. Start putting it into a folder on your phone, on your computer, whether it's in Apple, whether it's in Google Drive, whatever you use, Dropbox, start collecting it all there. And then once you're ready to go, you had a conversation with one of us, you just share that over there and we can go through and say, okay, cool, I got this, this, and this. All I need is this. And we all have tools where you can securely and safely upload. Don't email your loan officer's private personal information. So once
I can add to that real quick. If you're watching Facebook Live, you're probably pretty technologically savvy. But if you have friends or family or older relatives that aren't, just let your loan officer, let your realtor know, because most of the time we know either ourselves personally or a title or escrow attorney's office where you can bring your documents in and they will gladly help you scan them. So don't feel defeated if you're not up with technology. Let your team know. Let your advisors know. We can help.
And UPS store is your friend also.
UPS, yeah.
They make you pay, Randy. They charge you money. We're trying to find free options for these folks. So we've covered before what documentation you need. Basically, your income asset docs, ID, your certificate of eligibility, like Randy talked about. Let's get one of those real early in the process so that we know whether there's potentially an issue there. Brandy, once someone has given you all of that and you've gone through the pre-approval, I always get the question, what now? What do I get? What are we going to do? What do we review? What does that process look like once you finish your pre-approval? And what are the takeaways that your clients have before you send them back to their realtor?
Yeah, well, one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of people make is that they might go onto their bank's like mortgage portal where they can just type in like how much income they make or type in what their assets are. And then they get an email from that bank that says, hey, you're pre-qualified. And that is not the document that you want to go shopping on. So you do want to be making sure that you are talking to a professional who is like reviewing your documentation, getting your pay stubs. They know what an ETS is, what a BAH is, what a COLA is, what they understand the terms of your LES. They understand that you need orders. They understand where you need to live. And then once they get all of that documentation, then they can actually make a decision based on your qualifications. Now, I know there's a lot of people who get really worried. And, once they go shopping and get into the loan process, they're really worried that we're going to get denied for some reason. Well, if your loan officer has done their due diligence up front, they've asked you all the questions. They've asked you about child support, alimony, your certificate of eligibility. Are you getting out? Are you staying in? Let me see your pay stubs, your assets, everything. If they've done all of that work up front, there should be nothing to worry about. You shouldn't have a thing to worry about. They run you through automated underwriting system. And in the absence of you doing something really silly, like going to buy a car in the middle of the transaction, you should be approved once you get to the end.
I want to jump on that real quick, Josh. I think that's such an important point because sometimes we'll see it in Vetted VA or other groups where people will call and say, well, I didn't have to send any of that to the last person. That should be a red flag. Like you want to have the request for all the things that Brandy just mentioned, because that means that you're trying to put together a bulletproof approval. And so that's really the goal, is we want to make sure that if someone, within our community or any trusted loan professional is saying that you're pre-approved, the legwork has been done. So this is one of those instances where more is better.
And one of the things that we have all, like every single one of us has done, is actually save a veteran from a situation where the simplest item, such as your certificate of eligibility, was the deciding factor in whether you're pre-qualified or not pre-qualified. And it wasn't pulled by the biggest veteran lender out there. You got to the end and found out that maybe they didn't check your ETS and you were getting out of the military. Maybe they didn't qualify you on retirement income. Maybe they just didn't pull your certificate of eligibility at all. And those are the reasons why you should be worried. But if your loan officer is asking for all of those things up front, you should be fine.
Just to add to that real quickly too, customers need to know, loan officers, real estate agents, we hate documentation as much as you guys do. It's not our money we're lending you. It's the investors and the banks and the auditors that want all that documentation. So when we ask for something, just know most of us we are fighters in your corner. We've already battled to not need that. So if we're asking you for it, we really do need it. It's not because we just want a warm and fuzzy.
It's the golden rule. The person that has the gold makes the rules. And so we've already gone past that and look forward. And I think that's the biggest thing is, hopefully we're going to ask for everything up front. But if we miss something and we come ask you for it, it's not because we just like asking for things. So please, understand that and get it as quickly as possible so you don't delay the next step in the process.
Guys, we've got a nice question here. It's a good one. Unfortunately, when I put the question up, it covers Ryland and Randy. So you guys are going to take a little time out here. But what
just got better looking?
There you go. What is the average score you need for a VA loan? I've been told 650 is the lowest that they will work with. Is this true or false? So remember, they, meaning the VA, I'm 100% P&T and SSDI. So just curious on what I'm doing wrong. So the good news is you're not doing anything wrong. Randy,
Except for working with the wrong lender.
Fair. That's the only thing you did wrong. So you want to give them
Yeah.
the full answer there, Randy?
Yeah, 100%. So the VA does not have like a minimum credit score. The lender that you're working with does. And so if you have not, if your credit score is below 650 and the lender that you're working with has told you that you don't qualify, then you need to move on to a different lender because it's not a requirement. And I can say for myself, like I am someone who likes to live a little bit more conservative than some other lenders. And so I don't want to encourage you that if you have a 500 credit score that I say you should go purchase and I'm going to help you do that, because probably when you're reaching out to me and if you don't like that answer, then you can reach out to Rylan or you can reach out to Randy. But if you have a 500 credit score, we're going to talk about whether or not we can improve your score or whether or not we're going to move forward. Now, you can move forward with a 500 credit score, but I'm going to say, hey, look, we might be able to get you in a better position within 2-3 months to where your interest rate is going to be better. I don't turn down your loan. I'm not going to say that you can't do it. I'm going to say, I think in my professional opinion, I think we can get you in a better situation. So 650 is absolutely not correct.
And it goes back to the word that we use so often is called overlays, where that, like, I've got 43 different VA lenders. All of them will go down to 620. I lose about half of them at 619. I lose another half at 599, and I lose all but 5 at 579. So it's not about anything magic. That 650, it's just an overlay.
And to what Brandy said, just because we can do it doesn't mean we recommend you do it. You're going to have higher interest rates, higher costs, especially in the loan for having that lower score. So if we need to, or you need to move on a house quickly, it's something we can explore. But most of the time, a professional is going to recommend trying to get you into an overall better position to make it make more sense to purchase. So just keep that in mind as well. But it's
plus usually there's, everybody on this screen has the experience to be able to tell you sometimes very little things that make a big impact on the score. I mean, I did one the other day that there was a authorized user and just happened to look at the account, and the authorized user account was killing them. And that's like the simplest thing in the world, is just to get off of that authorized user. And when I took it off, his score went up 70 points. So
wow.
It's just taking someone that knows what they're doing, again, back to choosing the right people on your team.
So he actually follows up and says, thanks for the answer. We need some of the vetted VA folks here in Iowa.
We have some.
I thought we do. So Jermaine, if you're interested, go out to the vetted VA map, and we do have. I'm not off the top of my head knowing exactly who
I know
we
off the top of my head, I know too. Yeah.
Okay, so we got two good folks there that can help you and guide you and give you the same advice that we're going through here. Before we leave that whole prior to home shopping thought, Gary, I want to circle back with you. And what should a prospective buyer have thought through in terms of their wants, needs, and expectations in a home before they talk to the realtor? I mean, it's not necessary. You can guide them through that. But what do you want or hope for them to have gone through and thought about their needs in a home before they reach out to you, or at least are prepared to discuss with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always like to ask, what is the minimum amount of bedrooms and the minimum amount of bathrooms? And people oftentimes like, well, no, this is what I want. I said, well, let's look at the minimum and then moving on from there. That's always a bonus, especially in areas where it's a little bit more competitive, because every real estate professional and every loan professional, we ultimately want to get you what you want. Like, it doesn't make us happy or excited or even building a good relationship when we say, hey, we can't get you exactly what you want. Like, we want to be able to give you exactly what you want, whether it's interest rate, terms, house, any of those things. But there's exterior factors that do play a role in that. And so I think that would be my number one recommendation is look at, okay, what are my minimums in order to be able to do this? And then what are the things that I really would like? And then how can we get most of those, but then also be realistic? So I think that that's an important thing is let's start again with those minimums because that's something that's important to us. One of the other things that is also important too is being realistic. Sometimes there's a lot of urban legends around real estate in general. And oftentimes it will go back and I mean, zero disrespect. I have a family too, but we'll lean on our family and we'll lean specifically on older generations. And they may not have purchased a home in 20 or 30 years. And so I'm like, well, when I bought the house, this is what I did. And that may be well and good for a certain period of time, but it's really important that you choose professionals that you can put your trust in so that when that professional says, I understand and I respect where they're coming from, but this is the reality of today, that you can have confidence moving forward with the reality of today. Because a lot of times that's where the tension comes in, is the person that's doing this day in and day out, trying to share market realities with someone who genuinely loves you and's been in your life for a really long time, but might not fully understand what does things look like today. So those would be some of the advice that I give. One last kind of circle back to that last point, just for the Iowa question on people licensed in Iowa. Something that gets confused a lot of times is, remember, if a loan officer is licensed in your state, they can help you with any area in that state. So sometimes we see that in vetted VA, like, oh, there's not somebody in this particular city, and so I don't have anyone there. Just know that you can reach out to any of us in the entire state, and most likely we'll be able to help you if you choose to look at a vetted VA professional. But again, there may be other non-vetted VA professionals that are great choices too.
And sort of to close that loop, I always like to remind people, if you call someone off the map, if you call someone off of Google search, a loan officer, they should be willing, able, and happy to answer a question, even if you're not ready to apply and buy a house tomorrow. We are in the business of educating and empowering people to make good decisions. And hopefully we build a friendship through that process and you want to work with us when the time comes due. So never hesitate to reach out either to Vetted VA or to any pro that you find anywhere. And if they don't seem ready or willing or able to help you because you're not ready to buy today, I would suggest using an additional professional or continuing your search. So with that and kind of keeping things moving forward here, the next leverage point we really hit is you've found the home, you have your offer accepted, and now all sorts of things happen. So from the lender's side, Randy, communication gets really important here. You may not have talked to your lender as closely for the last week, 2-3 weeks while you're out writing offers, but what do you like to go through with your borrower when they call up and say, hey, great news, I got a purchase contract?
Did you say Brandy or Randy?
Oh, you guys got rhyming names, Randy.
Yeah.
Okay. So for me, the biggest thing is, now I'm involved in the offer and the pre-qual letter from the beginning. So hopefully there'll be no stealth surprises where that you get one without input from me to begin with, because I'm big on doing what I call a spitball fee sheet on every offer you make. So there's no surprises. You're going to see, obviously I don't have title work or, the actual homeowner's insurance or whatever, but within reasonable guesses, I'm going to be able to give you the cash to close that's going to result in, the payment that it's most likely going to result in, and cover all the aspects of that particular situation. I don't want you making an offer on something and then finding out that the payment's $1,000 more than you're comfortable with, because that can kill people's joy, obviously.
And that sounds like blindingly obvious, but I'm sure you guys are just like me, that I've talked to someone. Well, I've been pre-approved. Okay, what were you pre-approved for? $450. Awesome. Okay, and how much money were you going to be having to bring in at closing? Do you have that? Well, I don't have any money. Well, how did they approve you at $450? Were they getting a seller credit? Were they getting a lender credit? Did we have a plan for that? Oh, we didn't even talk about it. Okay, well, did they go through what the payment was? I have no idea what the payment is. And they were legitimately approved, but they didn't know any of those numbers. So both at time of pre-approval and while you're writing offers, so hey, I'm going to write $460 on this one, I'm going to write $420 on this one. how much cash do I have to have? What's my payment going to be? And yes, am I approved? But with that, Randy, what's the difference there now that we have the contract? So you've been given, you said, I got some spitball numbers. They're pretty darn close. We can get very close before you have a number. How does that change once a property gets under contract?
Well, obviously at that point in time, you're going to have the actual taxes from county to be able to plug in there, and you're going to hopefully be able to get right away. And this is one of the first things I want you to do is to get the homeowner's insurance. In Texas, the biggest Achilles heel is the property taxes. I mean, I think several of us are licensed there, and it's outrageous sometimes. So you're going to want to know that right up front and put that together for them so that they have a comfort level there, and then let them know, depending on what was negotiated as far as seller concessions, maybe you have to look at lender credit or whatever, and you're going to flesh that out to really nail down the cash to close and where's that money. Because there are people, again, we talk about being upfront and telling you everything, but there are people that absolutely have money somewhere that they just forgot to tell you about, and it's no stress whatsoever. But there's also people that know that they're going to have to do $10,000 and they don't have it. So where are you going to get it from, et cetera. So we got a certain amount of time that the contract is still able to be, washed away. And if we don't attack that right up front, then if people can get in a bind and lose their earnest money on top of everything else. So it's a matter of communicating right up front what the repercussions of what they've just done, that contract, getting ahead of it all to let them know up front what the actual repercussions are.
And when lenders say cash to close, if you're a customer out there, that does not mean literal cash. So if you have mattress money, if you have any cash savings in dollar bills, just know lenders cannot use that. Patriot Act and money laundering laws make us source all monies in a transaction. So that's something hopefully you cover up front, because if you show up with a stack of $100 bills at closing, we're going to have delays.
Especially if they're covered in white powder.
That's true. That's correct.
So beyond not coming in with stacks of $100 bills, Rylan, any other do's and don'ts in terms of what you should or shouldn't do with your money for the next 30 days now that you have a property under contract?
So we're going to beat this dead horse, but it just happened to me again recently. So obviously we need to keep talking about it. But please do not open new lines of credit, buy cars, take out a new credit card to get that 10% discount on furniture the week before you close. It can wait, I assure you. You don't want to jeopardize your entire home purchase in the midnight hour, because a lot of people think I can still qualify for this. And while that might be true, even if you qualify, you could cause weeks of delay waiting for the lender to verify that new debt, which we have to do in order to close. We can't just say, oh, your approval is, you've got plenty of room. We have to document it. And sometimes those statements don't come out for 30 days. So no new lines of credit anywhere in the transaction. And back to that data source, if you think you're going to hide it, as soon as that company pulls your credit to give you the new credit, our bank is notified. It's called credit monitoring, and it's live on every transaction while you're going through the process. So you're not sneaking it by anybody either. Hate to tell you.
Just circling back to, we're talking earlier, Randy saying I'm not being a stickler. I'm not asking for this. It's not that I want this. The lender will ask. If you have two accounts at Chase Bank and the wire comes in from the one that we have or from one that we don't have in the file, it's going to be a problem for us. I had somebody say, well, it's Chase Bank. Why do you care? And I said, well, you provided me 2 month statements that showed you had it in account XYZ, not in account 1, 2, 3, and that they are that big of a stickler, and they are tracking and monitoring inquiries, new accounts. It doesn't mean it's going to kill the deal, but it is at a minimum going to make extra work for everyone involved.
And
now, this reminds me of something actually.
Yeah. I was just going to say, don't quit your job. Go ahead, Brandon.
Don't quit your job. Yeah, no, please don't quit your job, for goodness sakes. But this just reminds me of something, like whenever you're qualified for, like your lender has said, hey, you're pre-qualified for this, and you gave them bank statements that said you had $10,000 in your bank, don't spend that money. Because we're intending on and we are sending qualifications based on those bank statements. And I'm not asking you every time that a new statement comes out to give me those statements. However, I did have a client who, once we started writing offers, the real estate agent called me and said, hey, the client is getting really nervous every time we write a new offer. And it says that they're going to have to put like down 1% or $5,400 for, this purchase as earnest money. That's what she was writing as their earnest money was 1%. And I'm like, no, I verified that they had $13,000. It's completely fine. It's absolutely fine. And then, I was like, well, let me touch base with the client and find out, because I have a bank statement that says they have it. And they said, well, we had a family member that had an issue and we needed to help them. And so we gave them, $10,000. Well, I've been writing pre-approval letters based on the fact that you gave me an account statement that said that you had $10,000. So it's really important to keep everything the same. Just you have money in the account. If it changes for some reason, we need to talk about it. So every kind of thing that it changes as far as your income, your assets, your job, what's going on in your life, we kind of need to talk about it as you're shopping.
Well, let's have fun for just a second for everybody watching live here. I want everybody to look at the other four people's face when I ask this question, because this will be fun. So let's say I'm working with all of you at the moment, and we are scheduled to close on January 29th. And we're with a buyer that has very limited funds, but within reason for our cash to close. And then you get an email from you just saying, hey, by the way, we had a couple of delays, so we're going to go ahead and move to February 5th. Can you go ahead and get the new cash to close out to them?
Mm-hmm. It's a big deal.
Per diem interest.
Yeah, that's a big deal because that, like when changing from the end of the month, so you're going to pay interest from the date of closing till the end of the month. And so if you close one day before the end of the month, that's a very small amount. But if you move into February and then instead of closing with 1 day's interest, you close with 25 days of interest, that's going to increase your closing costs quite a bit. And if we were really kind of skirting by on how much you had to close, it's really going to affect whether or not you're actually going to get to that closing table.
And on top of that, the per diem interest, again, we push a month later, most states, you're going to have another month of property taxes. It might be $300 of property taxes. It could be $1,000 of property taxes. And we're talking about that client that's tight on money. It is something that can present quite the curveball at the end. Gary, from the real estate side, once you have that contract, you're the one that probably knew first that, hey, we have an accepted offer, but that triggers a number of things on the real estate side where the buyer really needs to spring into action and do a few things. In that first 7 days or so, what are they expecting in terms of disclosures on the real estate side, needing to get their inspection done, anything else that they need to get their ducks in a row early?
Absolutely. So a couple things would be probably the most important one is, are your real estate professional and your loan professional in good communication with one another? Because you as the consumer should be able to choose whomever you're working with, and they might not have a working relationship prior to meeting you, which is perfectly fine, but you need to make sure that they're communicating with each other. Because one of the common complaints, we all have office talk that everyone in every industry shares. And the frustrated text that I get from loan officers are, you got to be kidding me. I just got this contract that's supposed to be closing next week, right? So the real estate agent and all these, you can see all my coworkers here saying, oh my gosh, yes. The real estate agent didn't get the contract to them right away. And so now they're jumping through hoops because that is a contract. There are contractual terms and deadlines that need to be met without being able to ask for extensions. And the extensions do not have to be granted by the other side. So make sure that your real estate professional and your loan professional are connecting. That's important. You need to be able to make sure that you're ready for scheduling a home inspection. One of the most common questions that we get in Vetted VA is there a difference between a home inspection and an appraisal? And there 100% is. An appraisal is looking at the minimum property requirements, and their main objective is to establish the value and minimal safety requirements for the home. They're not doing a thorough investigation of all the systems of the home. They're not going through the same way that a home inspector would. The home inspector is going to be an additional fee, And most of the time, there's also going to be a deadline as to how long can you have a home inspection for in that initial period of time, and when can you make a request. So that's really important. One of the other things that's important to look at as well is I'll have people that want to space out their home inspection and their appraisal. The clock is still ticking on both of those items. And so I know that it can be an upfront cost sometimes to go ahead and tell your loan officer to order the appraisal, but you don't know how far in advance the appraiser is booked out. So that's something that can become a challenge. And also, it's something that, again, if you're looking at not causing any delays, there's going to be stipulations in your contract. If you, to try to get your contract accepted, a lot of times your real estate agent will advise you on shortening the terms of these things. Shorten the appraisal contingency, shorten the loan contingency, shorten the home inspection contingency, like shorten, because everyone wants as much certainty as possible. And so one way that you do that is by shortening those time frames. But if you're not having open communication, if I'm not calling and saying, hey, Brandy, what are you seeing in this area for turn times on your appraisal orders? And I'm saying, they'll be fine. She'll get it done in 2 days. And like, as much as Brandy is a rock star and is on top of things and really can move, she's not in full control of everything. She can't show up herself with a clipboard and say, I'm here to do the appraisal. I know that she would if she was able to do so, but she's not.
Would.
2008.
Yeah. That's a whole nother, a whole nother thing. But so that's important to be able to look at those things and just know you're going to be out of pocket a few things at the beginning, but they're going to serve you well if you can get the information up front so that you are very top heavy to get everything knocked out, so that as we move the process along, everyone else can do the job behind the scenes and your job's pretty much done.
And something on that point, I'll just say really quickly, if you're worried about the cost of an appraisal up front, the other side to that is even a 15-day extension, a 2-week extension on your loan, if there's extension costs, could easily rack up to $1,000 or more. So, or you risk your loan officer, if they're, good at their job, they're a professional, they're not going to let your rate expire. Most banks go 30 to 60 days maximum extension. So you do have that buffer time, but it doesn't mean it's free. And so there's that cost associated if your loan officer locks your interest rate for 30 days on your 30-day contract, and a week later you want to hold off or this and that, and there's a delay, just know we were operating based on your original contract, your original timeline. And so keep that in mind if you're balancing paying for an appraisal now or waiting and delaying. Go ahead, Brenda.
So one of the things that I don't think that we talk about a lot, like because we are moving, just because we do this all the time and we're like talking with clients all the time, and we're saying, you said you wanted to buy a house, you got pre-qualified to buy a house, you got in contract to buy a house. One of the things that we're not talking about is like that fight or flight mode that actually like happens like as soon as you get into contract. And I don't care if you are Rylan Maddox, who recently bought a house, and myself, who just bought one a couple of years ago. It doesn't matter if you're like super experienced at the process, like that whole like, holy crap, I just did this. I'm about to do this. We're about to go into this process. And so a lot of the stress actually happens like right at that moment when you actually understand that you're in contract and people are asking for things and people are wanting money. What we need the inspection. We need to have this. There's days, timelines on it, and you haven't even had a second to like actually process like what's happening. And so especially for some of our veterans who might be dealing with some PTSD and a lot of stress that comes along with the actual purchase process. Like, again, if it's just even us being knowledgeable professionals who understand this, we still feel that stress that happens when you're actually going to move forward with the process. So it's really important to, if you're feeling those stressors, to sort of like let your loan officer know, let your real estate agent know, so they can just, if you're not being explained fully, they can help you and guide you through that really, really tough part, because it's a lot of like go at the beginning, and then it kind of stops, and then there's a very long waiting period, which kind of enhances the stress a little bit, especially with that appraisal period. we get a lot of people who are like, well, what's going to happen with the appraisal? Is it going to come in? Does it think? Well, if you're working with professionals who have done their comparative market analysis, who have pre-qualified you in the proper way, then you shouldn't have anything to worry about, but just let your professional know so they can help at least mitigate some of that stress.
Absolutely. Well, we try to keep these at an hour or less. So we've gone in great detail and we're about 44 minutes. So we got a lot of ground to cover. So we're going to make it like lightning round. It doesn't literally have to be lightning round, but let's try just try and go with just some quicker answers to the remaining portion of it. So now we've gone through the process. You got your disclosures out, you got your appraisal, you got your inspection, all that's negotiated, and we're moving forward towards closing. Gary, when does that final walkthrough come in the process? Because sometimes people get confused. I had a client do a final walkthrough yesterday. We're closing on Friday. And they were like, well, don't we do it like 5 minutes beforehand? What does that normally look like from a realtor's end?
Sure. There's going to be a little bit of a difference of opinion on that. And also some states will have a different process than other states as well. For me personally, I like to do it 2 to 3 days prior to the close. And so my reason for doing that is if there's something that was agreed to be repaired and hasn't been done yet, then we still have a little bit of time to do that. Now, the flip side of that, and I've had this argument professionally with some other people, is they'll say, oh, I want to do it the day that we're closing because what happens if there's damage that happens? So I understand and respect that. However, once your loan professional gets money moving, it can be really hard to make that train stop. And it can be really costly as well, because if it's sitting at a title company and you say, put the brakes on, and they've got to send it back to the lender, you might be in a world of hurt. And you might have just put your entire transaction in jeopardy. And it could be because something, pretty simple. So I do like having it 2 to 3 days in advance to do the final walkthrough, to look at that, and also to be able to have that discussion, because maybe at this point it's like, well, they're not going to be able to fix this cosmetic thing over here, but maybe we'll be able to get a small credit of $400. Would that work for you? Yeah, that would work for us. We'll go to Home Depot and fix it afterwards. Okay, great. Let me call the loan officer, let them know what's going on, and then go from there. So that's my recommendation is 2 to 3 days, but I like being able to have that buffer because I just know that more often than not, it's going to be an issue on the financing side of things than it is on the actual likelihood that something might change between those 2 and 3 days and the time of closing.
And go ahead, Lauren.
If you get that credit, let your loan officer know, because the worst thing is we're going to hand over keys and you don't see your $1,000, $500 closing credit because we didn't know. And now, as Gary said, that money's moving, and yeah, worst case, if you want to close immediately, you might have to give up that credit. And so let your loan officer know. That communication key is so important.
So in addition to that final walkthrough, Gary, a fun one that people aren't 100% clear on, and most people don't realize it's actually negotiated in the contract for the most part. When do they get possession of the property, or when should they expect to get their keys and become the owner and actually get to walk in? We call them and tell them, hey, you've closed, you're now a homeowner. They don't care. Cool. When do I get my keys?
Yeah, that is ultimately the question, right? We're doing all this for when do I get keys? So that is going to be determined in your contract. So you're going to be looking in your contract for a specific section on possession. So that's what's going to be called, is when are you taking possession? So it could be close +3 is a common thing, so that the sellers have a little bit of time to get out once they get the money. Like maybe they don't have any money. Maybe they're cash strapped and they have to pay from the proceeds of the home movers to get their stuff out. It could be the same day, so knowing that possession date, that's the key question. No pun intended, but I guess it kind of is a little pun. But yeah, that's the key question, is when is possession? When is possession happening? And then when you know that possession's happening, you need to make sure that your utilities are in place. A lot of times there'll be people that will call up and say, oh my gosh, we just moved in and there's no electricity, and it's, we just had the snowstorm come through and it's 30 degrees. And well, did you call like I recommended to make sure that they transferred? No, I forgot to do that. Okay, well, the seller called to make sure to cancel on their end. You got to put put things into your name on your end. So that's an important thing as well, is like lining up the utilities with your possession date.
Perfect. Randy, capital R, Randy. One of the things that's unique with VA loans, a lot of times with active duty, we will need to close with a power of attorney. When does that need to be lined up, and how does that impact the actual closing? And then sometimes it's not a power of attorney, but we're not local and we're having to mail out docs for signing. What type of preparation does that entail on a borrower's behalf?
Again, it goes back to communication, because that's the sort of stuff you should let your loan officer and your realtor know, so that they can get title and get a lot of times. Not a lot of times, power of attorneys have to be approved, and they have to go through steps where not only the title company has to approve them, the lender has to approve them, and then sometimes they have to be notarized wherever you are. And so you've got to find somebody that the embassy or someplace that is open when you're open. So it's not a matter of just at the last minute saying, "Hey, I need to do this." You need to communicate that up front, because that is a very sensitive. You're basically adding about 3 days to the process when you do those things, but they need to be 3 days early in the process, as opposed to at the last minute. Let us know. Let us know, and we'll take care of it.
And don't get annoyed if escrow asks you that, your realtor asks you that, your lender asks you that. If they all ask you, rather than being annoyed, say, "Hey, I'm in good hands." We got people that are thinking ahead and trying to get their ducks in a row. If no one asks if you're going to be in town for signing, or if there might be a power of attorney, you might want to be volunteering this information.
Well, that's because there's actually some extra processes in there, I guess, that we haven't talked about. So especially if you're not going to be signing in the town that you're at, your title company is not actually going to be funding unless they have the physical documents. That means we're actually going to have to snail mail or FedEx documents from one state to the other so they can verify your signatures. And then for active duty people, we're actually going to have to do something that's called an alive and well statement. So if you used a power of attorney and your spouse is in the new state and you are still stationed in Korea somewhere, and they have signed power of attorney with your documents, then what's going to happen is on the day of closing, your lender and title company are going to have to verify that you are in fact alive and well with your commanding officer in Korea. So it's a very important thing for you to let us know up front.
And with that, it's also important to ask the question, who all needs to be there for the signing? Because that's a common one as well. Oh, well, my spouse wasn't on the loan, and so they're halfway to our new home already. They're 1,000 miles in. You're like, well, they're actually going to need to sign
a couple things. Yeah.
So that's an important question to ask: if who all is going to need to sign, and then making sure that those people are all available when it's time to sign, if there's not a power of attorney in place.
Absolutely. So, and second only to the people being present to sign is the money getting to closing. Rylan, what does that look like when docs go out, borrower, whether they're signing at title, whether they're signing remotely, whether we're using a power of attorney? What does that process look like, including, let's say this is a remote signing. You're not able to be with your client. They're over in Korea. What legwork should you be doing with your loan officer ahead of time to understand those numbers, understand those docs, and get that money to escrow?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple things here. One, you want to know the numbers. So your loan officer especially should be going over once you have final loan approval and signing scheduled, so we know the date for the prorations and everything, right? We know what your cash to close is. We know what your monthly payment is. There's no surprises hey, you wanted to change your interest rate and you don't find out till it's at the closing table, right? It's going to be a delay. And for the cash to close, you want to know that number because a few things. I've had more than many transactions where veterans are PCSing, the bank accounts are tight, you're spending a lot of money on that move, and all of a sudden your bank account is short. You were planning on that paycheck, right, to hit before closing so you could cover those closing costs. You don't want to be surprised by that. You don't want to show up at closing and see a number that you weren't ready to see or expecting to see, right? Also, you need to be familiar with your bank. If you intend to wire or get a cashier's check from your bank for your closing costs, most title companies or escrow attorneys do not allow personal checks at closing due to the timeline of cashing those. So they want a wire or cashier's check. I've had a number of transactions where either someone went to wire and the bank wanted a 48-hour hold, or even worse, the bank wanted the person to come into the branch in person to wire the money. One of my worst ones was a Hawaii purchase, and their bank was in Maryland, and the bank refused to release the funds unless they were in the branch. My borrower had to buy a ticket, go to Maryland, walk into the branch, wire their money, and fly back to Hawaii. That was a very costly situation for us to run into. And they were not happy with their bank, but those who hold the gold make the rules. So make sure you have access to your money and you're going to be able to withdraw it or send it when that time comes. So yeah, just again, communication and knowing everything as early as possible ahead of time.
And again, if that involves moving bank accounts or whatever, make sure that you tell the loan officer so that the underwriter understands why it's coming from somewhere besides the Maryland
bank.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, please don't do that.
Yeah.
Please don't do that.
You also want to make sure that you're connecting with your title or escrow company to know where will any overpayment end up. Because right now there's a lot of just fraud in general. And so sometimes title or escrow companies may be mailing out checks, and they may be mailing a check to your new home before you arrive there. And so make sure that you know, hey, if there's an overpayment, how is this money coming back to me? Because public record shows when a home sells. So someone knows that home sold, and they might know that there's a check coming. So they might be checking to see if your money's coming their way. So just be aware that you know where that money's going.
And on wire, just because this just happened to my client, $77,000 at closing. They got fraudulent wire instructions, and the scammers had access to the title company's email accounts. So they knew the conversations that had been had. So when my borrower called the number in the scam email that had the scam wire instructions and said, hey, this number looks different than I was told, the person referenced old emails, read back to them the correct number. They were like, yes, that is a conversation that happened. How would they know that who they were talking to was in fact a scammer themselves? On the phone live, wired the money and it went to a bad account. So what I'm telling all my friends now and clients and customers is, if you're going to wire money, Google the title company's phone number, the main line, call it and verify the wire instructions with your title rep. Do not rely on phone numbers in the email, and just be super safe, especially if you're wiring a large amount of money. Take the extra 10 to 15 minutes out of your day. She did get the money back, for those that want to know the end. It involved the FBI in about 3 months, and it was a big ordeal. But
yeah, wire fraud is on the rise.
Yeah,
absolutely. So we're about 57 minutes now. We covered a lot of ground. Every time I think that, hey, what we do is not rocket science, I am reminded it is not rocket science, but it is very complex. Lots of moving parts, lots of things to keep an eye on. So I'm going to reference back to one of the first things we said here in the show. Who you work with matters, that they know these things, that they have systems in place to cover all of these things, because no one could remember everything that you need to be on top of and aware of. So it's very important that you have a diligent real estate team, a diligent lending team, and hopefully an escrow and title company that is also working on your behalf to keep everything on track for a smooth closing. Communicate, make sure you reach out, ask questions. If something doesn't make sense, keep asking until it makes sense. So with that, we always do like to go around the horn. So one last quick piece of advice for everyone. Gary, I'm going to put you on the spot. You're stuck here on the top row with me. What's final words for everyone tonight?
My final encouragement would be really find yourself in a place of patience, because there's so many moving parts. Just like Josh was just saying, there's so many different things that are going on behind the scenes. And almost always everyone wants to work for your best interest. And so I think that can be hard when things seem to be really difficult to really buy into. But for the most part, it's very true. And there's just things that are outside of our control. And that would also include when you first move into your home, that there's no perfect home. Even a brand new home is going to have issues. And so if you find yourself on the first, second, third day with something going on in your home, it may just be because it's a new home, and that's just Murphy's Law. That's just how it happens sometimes, but there was no ill intent. And just be patient with yourself, extend grace, and continue to rely on those professionals that got you to that point, because we're going to continue to be there for you. So just reach out to us so that we can help.
Brandy?
So I think my job as a loan officer is to be like a duck. So on the surface, it looks like things are just smooth sailing, like everything is just fine. But really on the back half of that, we are managing a lot of processes, and so we're paddling under the water. You can't see it. You're not supposed to see it. We are really working hard to get you from one to the other. So communication is key, and just know that your loan officer is doing everything that they can to get you to the end. But obviously it's when you're working with the right team.
Rylan?
I like to stress you're not going to bother us. I hear so many times, honestly, days late, that someone had a concern or saw something was wrong, but they didn't want to bother me, so they didn't reach out. Bother your professionals. That's what we're here for, please. Because
Bother us.
Yeah, please. We'd rather hear your concerns or point out that, yeah, it's just a typo and you're absolutely right, and get it fixed as early as possible. If you sit there for days anxious and stressed and worried, we don't want that for you. So bother away. That's what we're here for.
Randy?
Absolutely. And one of the big things for me, I used to have a boss that would tell me that don't tell me about the labor, just show me the baby. And sometimes we as loan officers do that. But the biggest thing for us is that we want to be moving. I'd say the secret to happiness is to understand that it's not quite as easy as it all looks, and you can't push in A and B comes out immediately. It's got to go through a whole team of people moving through, et cetera, et cetera. And so, be flexible. Don't make it where that you're the only time that your delivery truck or your items or whatever is delivered at 2 p.m. the day of that, et cetera. Build some flexibility in, build some positivity in, and know that everybody's pulling together for you, and we're all in the same boat.
And we actually had this on the outline, and I don't think we had stressed it or even talked about it enough. Build in some margin to the process. Plan for the best, expect the best, but plan for the worst. Don't schedule movers. Hey, my contract says I'm closing at 9 a.m. on the 31st. Don't plan the movers for 9:01 a.m. I had a client a few weeks back that I thought it was ridiculous. They wanted an extra month in their apartment so they had no stress, but they knew themselves. They said, I'm not putting stress on myself. We'll move whenever we move. The flip side is that person that wants the movers there the second they get the keys, and it's just a recipe for additional stress, and you're almost begging misfortune to come and visit you. So every step through the process, do your part. Have a team that you have high expectations of, but know that things can and do diverge. Before we came on here, Brandy was telling us that she has a file that docs should have gone out today, and a series of calamities that no one could have prevented that from happening. But there was margin built into it, and they will get there to escrow tomorrow, and the deal will get closed. So just make sure you're working with folks that work that way, and that make sure you don't squeeze yourself into a corner by planning for perfection, because it's rare. It happens, but it is rare. So again, appreciate the four of you sharing all your knowledge and expertise with us tonight. We will be back next Tuesday, with another crew of experts, another topic, and most importantly, to answer your questions. Only Jermaine showed up with a question for us tonight, but it was a good one. So if you have a question, you want a more detailed answer than what we're able to do just in text out in the Vetted VA forums on Facebook, reach out, come back next Tuesday, and we will be here. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Have a good night.